Welcome, everybody. We made it. Past the barriers, past the IDs. أهلا وسهلا فيكم في الأمسية الشعرية اللي حاول الصهاينة يلغوها. Welcome to the event they tried to cancel. My name is Basma Ghalayini. I'm the Arabic editor at Comma Press and one of the organizers of tonight's event. I am from Gaza, born and bred. The ironic thing about tonight's event is when Dani Abulhawa, the director of this show, first approached Comma to suggest a joint event, her plan was to have a modest, low-key, family-friendly event to support the local Palestinian community. Comma's hopes for the event were similar, to provide a space for the local Palestinian community and the pro-Palestinian protest community in a legitimate art space, without the police or security agencies breathing down our necks. For the last 29 weeks, this community has been marching peacefully through Manchester's streets, calling for an end to the genocide taking place before our eyes. For 6 whole months, that hour we've spent every weekend marching with others through the city centre has been the only time in the week when we've felt remotely sane. The protest community has been the only place I, as a Palestinian, have felt like I'm not going mad. This event was meant to be our way of saying thank you. Thank you to that protest community, and to invite that community into a non-criminalized, respected art space. The protests every week have had creativity at their core. Poetry has been read every single week, and if that poetry and the wider tradition of resistance poetry isn't a legitimate art form, then I have no idea what is. From a Comma point of view, we also wanted to showcase a diary that we have been bringing out into the world over the last few months. Atef Abu Saif was the editor of one of Comma Press's city books back in 2014. And just as he did in the war of 2014, he spent the first 3 months of this onslaught writing daily accounts of his experiences and sending them to Comma, either as WhatsApp texts or as voice notes. These are non-partisan accounts of everyday life in Gaza during this time. You might almost call them neutral accounts. At Comma, we've been working round the clock to get these diary entries published in Western media. So everything you'll hear tonight and everything in the collected diary, Don't Look Left, has already been published as extracts in places like the New York Times, the Washington Post, The Nation, Slate, The Guardian, Le Monde, and so on. There's nothing unique about Atef's experiences. Atef saw his parents' house flatten. I have seen my mother's house flattened, and my grandparents' house bombed, and my father's clinic, his IVF clinic, with 5,000 embryos, which doubles as his house, I've seen that bombed too. Atef saw his close friends and relatives killed. I have seen my close friends and relatives killed. If anything, Atef's experiences are considerably milder and more fortunate than most others in Gaza. This is worth bearing in mind as you hear his testimony. He has been one of the lucky ones. Tonight's event will also feature Palestinian poems read by writers and members of the Palestinian community here in Manchester and in the UK. The point of tonight is to draw a line under the culture of silence in the art world about what's happening in Gaza and still happening, and in Palestine more generally. We won't be silenced by lobby groups. We won't be intimidated by libelous allegations. No one can tell Palestinians how to describe their suffering. No one. As for the question of politics and art, I defer to the Palestinian poet Marwan Makhoul and his 4-line poem. لكي أكتب شعراً ليس سياسياً يجب أن أصغي إلى العصافير ولكي أسمع العصافير يجب أن تخرس الطائرة. In order for me to write poetry that isn't political, I must listen to the birds. And in order to hear the birds, the warplanes must be silent. anyone with a phone and a social media account, the things we have been witnessing for the last 6 months have been nothing short of traumatizing, made all the more horrific by the way no one even dares to speak up against it. Politicians are scared, the media is scared, academics are scared. Fear is what has perpetuated this culture of silence, simple fear. لا أي حد عنده موبايل أو له حساب على أي منصة تواصل اجتماعي. الأحداث اللي شاهدناها خلال ال6 أشهر الماضية أقل ما يمكن وصفه إنها أحداث صادمة. واللي زود هاي الصدمة هو الطريقة اللي ما حدش استرجى ينتقدها. السياسيين على أشكالهم خايفين، الإعلام خايف، الأكاديميين خايفين. الخوف هو الإشي الوحيد اللي عزز ثقافة الصمت. الخوف وبس. Tonight is not about silence.
Hi, my name's Kingsley, and I'm going to be reading entries from Don't Look Left by Atef Abu Saif. Saturday, October 7th, day 1. I never thought it would happen while I was swimming. I'd risen around 5:30 a.m. Today was going to be a good day, I told myself. I'd swim until 7:30, then take a shower in my flat in Saftawi, near Jabalia, the refugee camp where I spent most of my life until a few years ago. By 8:30, I'd be on my way to my first meeting in Kora, near Khan Yunis. At the beach, tiny fishing boats can be seen heading into the shore after a night at sea. There were 4 of us, my brother Mohammed, my 15-year-old son, Yasser, and my brother-in-law Ismail and me. I was visiting from the West Bank and only planned to be around for a few days. Yasser had asked to accompany me. He missed his grandparents. We drive to the northern end of the beach, park on the main road, then walk down to the shell-flecked sand. As usual, Israeli warships squat on the horizon, visible to everyone. The sea is so inviting. Ismail and I strip down to our shorts. Yasser takes photos. Mohammed chain smokes the way he always does in the morning. Suddenly, explosions sound in all directions. Rockets tracing lines across the sky. It's a training maneuver, I think, and carry on swimming. It might last an hour or 2, I tell myself. I swim back to shore, calling on Ismail to come with me. He shrugs as we make our way out of the water. I shout to him that it doesn't seem to be stopping. Suddenly, everyone on the beach begins to run. We have to get out of here. Mohammed shouts. Explosions ring out louder and louder. Ismail and I run barefoot, carrying our clothes and shoes close to our chests. Everyone around us is doing the same. When we reach the car, I hit the accelerator before the others have even closed their doors. I drive like a madman as people leap in front of our car, hoping to get a lift. We stop and let 5 men pile into the back. We speed off again, honking to clear the way. I turn to Mohammed. Where's Ismail? Did we leave him for the rockets? Mohammed laughs. No, we left him to the sharks. He told Ismail to go on. His house wasn't far from the beach. Mohammed's shark joke doesn't make me feel any better. For hours, no one knows what was going on. Then the news trickles in. A friend, a young poet and musician named Omar Abu Shawish, had been swimming just like us in the sea in the front of the Nusayrat camp when he and a friend were hit by a shell from a passing warship. They were reportedly the first 2 Ghassan victims. Tuesday, October 17th, day 10. I see death approaching, hear its steps growing louder. Just be done with it, I think. It's the 11th day of the conflict, but all the days have merged into one. The same bombardment, the same fear, the same smell. On the news, I read the names of the dead on the ticker at the bottom of the screen. I wait for my name to appear. In the morning, my phone rang. It was Rula, a relative in the West Bank, telling me she'd heard there'd been an airstrike in Talat Hawa, a neighborhood on the south side of Gaza City where my cousin Hatem lives. Hatem is married to Huda, my wife's only sister. He lives in a 4-story building that also houses his mother and brothers and their families. I called around, but no one's phone was working. I walked to Al-Shifa Hospital to read the names. Lists of the dead are pinned up daily outside a makeshift morgue. I could barely approach the building. Thousands of Ghassans had made the hospital their home. Its gardens, its hallways, every empty space or spare corner had a family in it. I gave up and headed towards Hatem's. 30 minutes later, I was on his street. Ruler had been right. Huda and Hatem's building had been hit only an hour earlier. The bodies of their daughter and grandchild had already been retrieved. The only known survivor was Wissam, one of their other daughters, who had been taken to the ICU. Wissam had gone straight into surgery, where both of her legs and her right hand had been amputated. Her graduation ceremony from art college had taken place only the day before. She has to spend the rest of her life without legs, with one hand. What about the others, I asked someone. We can't find them, came the reply. Amid the rubble, we shouted, "Hello, can anyone hear us?" We called out the names of those still missing, hoping some might still be alive. By the end of the day, we'd managed to find 5 bodies, including that of a 3-month-old. We went to the cemetery to bury them. In the evening, I went to see Wissam in the hospital, and she was barely awake. After half an hour, she asked me, "Kalo, uncle, I'm dreaming, right?" I said, "We're all in a dream. My dream is terrifying." "Why?" "All our dreams are terrifying." After 10 minutes of silence, she said, "Don't lie to me, Kalo. In my dream, I don't have legs. Is it true?" "It's true, isn't it? I have no legs." "But you said it's a dream." "I don't like this dream, Kalo." I had to leave. For a long 10 minutes, I cried and cried. Overwhelmed by the horrors of the past few days, I walked out of the hospital and found myself wandering the streets. I thought idly, we could turn this city into a film set for war movies, Second World War films and end-of-the-world movies. We could hire it out to the best Hollywood directors, Doomsday on demand. Who could have the courage to tell Hannah so far away in Ramallah that her only sister had been killed, that her family had been killed? I phoned my colleague Mana and asked her to go to her house with a couple of friends and try to delay the news from getting to her. Lie to her, I told Mana. Say the building was attacked by F-16s, but the neighbors think Huda and Hatem were out at the time. Any lie that could help. In the morning, I rejoined the search for bodies. The building was, as T.S. Eliot would say, a heap of broken images. We searchers picked through the ruins under the cricket-like hum of drones we couldn't see in the sky. Wednesday, October 25th, day 19. The hospital's lack of medicine and equipment is shocking. Patients are operated on without anesthesia, and it's become normal to hear screaming in the wards. There are no painkillers, no sedatives. A ward designed for 3 beds now has 7. Beds are crammed into corridors, waiting rooms, operating theaters, even around entrances of bathrooms and stairwells. This morning, Al-Shifa Hospital was overflowing with people. No doctor was there, only one young nurse trying to manage everyone's needs. When I arrived at her bedside, Wissam made a request that broke my heart. She wanted to know, could I give her a lethal injection? She was confident that Allah would forgive her. I smiled and said, "But he will not forgive me, Wissam." "I'm going to ask him on your behalf," she said. I cited a verse on the wisdom of the Almighty and told her, He preferred that she be alive amid all this death. She insisted that she could no longer stand the pain. She'd been given no drugs. Her face was pale, and she seemed ready to give up. There's no sign of this war ending. No one in power speaks of a ceasefire. On the news, there's discussions of a few hours truce for humanitarian purposes to let in a little food and medicine. I find it unbearable to listen to the way they talk about us, decide things for us, without ever asking any of us. At 3:15 this morning, I woke to an airstrike. I jumped up from my mattress thinking it had hit Faraj's house where I'd been sleeping. We ran to the window and looked at the street below. We heard the sound of walls collapsing and saw glass everywhere. Our noses were filled with the heavy smell of burned metal and wood. We counted 3 strikes and started our usual guessing game. Where was the hit this time? In the morning, Mohammed told me it had been at the Al-Halabi family house. Initially, 6 bodies were found and 15 people were rescued, with others still missing in the rubble. I went down to support the rescue efforts. We picked up pieces of mutilated bodies and gathered them on a blanket. You find a leg here, a hand there, while the rest looks like minced meat. In the past week, many Gazans have started writing their names on their hands and legs in pen or permanent marker so they can be identified when death comes. This might seem macabre, but it makes perfect sense. We want to be remembered. We want our stories to be told. We seek dignity. At the very least, our names will be on our graves. The smell of unretrieved bodies under the ruins of a house hit last week remains in the air. The more time passes, the stronger the smell. Jabalia is famous for its narrow alleys, but now they're all blocked with fallen masonry, chunks of concrete, tangled metal. Standing on a pile of chaos that a few hours ago was someone's home, I think about the neighborhood where I was born and raised. I know its maze of narrow streets by heart. I can navigate them with my eyes closed. Soon, all that will be left will be a memory.
I'm Ramsey Janini. I'm Palestinian on my father's side from a village in Palestine 48 called Ain Karam. My grandparents were driven from their home in 1948, never allowed to return. Everything was stolen and sold to a man from Brooklyn. So I'm going to read a poem by Palestinian national poet Mahmoud Darwish. The poem is called Identity Card, so I'm reading it in translation by Dennis Johnson Davis. This poem first appeared in a 1964 collection called Leaves of the Olive Tree, or Olive Leaves, although it feels to me it could have been written yesterday. Put it on record, I am an Arab, and the number of my card is 50,000. I have 8 children, and the 9th is due after summer. What's there to be angry about? Put it on record, I am an Arab, working with comrades of toil in a quarry. I have 8 children. For them I wrest the loaf of bread, the clothes and exercise books from the rocks, and beg for no alms at your door, lower not myself at your doorstep. What's there to be angry about? Put it on record, I am an Arab. I am a name without a title, patient in a country where everything lives in a whirlpool of anger. My roots took hold before the birth of time, before the burgeoning of the ages, before cypress and olive trees, before the proliferation of weeds. My father is from the family of the plow, not from high-born nobles, and my grandfather was a peasant without line or genealogy. My house is a watchman's hut made of sticks and reeds. Does my status satisfy you? I am a name without a surname. Put it on record, I am an Arab. Color of hair, jet black. Color of eyes, brown. My distinguishing features, on my head the agal cords over a kafia, scratching him who touches it. My address, I'm from a village, remote, forgotten, its streets without name, and all its men in the fields in quarry. What's there to be angry about? Put it on record, I am an Arab. You stole my forefathers' vineyards and land I used to till, I and all my children, and you left us and all my grandchildren nothing but these rocks. Will your government be taking them too, as is being said? So put it on record at the top of page 1. I don't hate people. I trespass on no one's property. And yet, if I were to become hungry, I shall eat the flesh of my usurper. Beware. Beware of my hunger and of my anger.
Hello, my name's Maxine Peake, and I have been involved in Palestinian activism for many years. I first became aware of the plight of Palestinians from being very, very young. My step-grandfather, Jim Taylor, was stationed in mandated Palestine just after the war. So through his experiences, I learned and became very aware of the situation in Palestine. I grant you refuge in evocation and prayer. I bless the neighbourhood and the minaret to guard them from the rocket. From the moment it is a general's command until it becomes a raid. I grant you and the little ones refuge, the little ones who change the rocket's course before it lands with their smiles. I grant you and the little ones refuge, the little ones now asleep like chicks in a nest. They don't walk in their sleep towards dreams. They know death lurks outside the house. Their mother's tears are now doves following them, trailing behind every coffin. I grant the father refuge, the little one's father who holds the house upright when it tilts after the bombs. He implores the moment of death, have mercy, spare me a little while for their sake. I've learnt to love my life. Grant them a death as beautiful as they are. I grant you refuge from hurt and death, refuge in glory of our siege here in the belly of the whale. Our streets exalt God with every bomb. They pray for the mosques and the houses. And every time the bombing begins in the north, our supplications rise in the south. I grant you refuge from hurt and suffering. With words of sacred scripture, I shield the oranges from the sting of phosphorus and the shades of cloud from the smog. I grant you refuge in knowing that the dust will clear, and they who fell in love and died together will one day laugh. Hiba Abu Nader was a Palestinian poet, novelist and educator. Her novel, Oxygen is Not for the Dead, won second place in the Shuja Award for Arab Creativity in 2017. She was killed along with her son in her home in the Gaza Strip by an Israeli airstrike on October the 20th, 2023. She was only 32.
Wednesday, November 1st, day 26. When Ibrahim called yesterday to ask if I was in Jabalia or not, I had no idea how bad the bombardment had been. Everything is destroyed. The old alleyways and the narrow lanes that Jabalia was famous for had now all disappeared. It had all become one place. This is what we would call the Sanada neighborhood. I know every building and who lives in each of them. Many of the alleyways that have disappeared witnessed key moments in my childhood. In my mind, I can redraw those alleyways and redraw the boundaries, resketch the buildings. Give me an architect and $1 billion, and I can rebuild it from scratch. I spend 2 hours helping with the relief effort, trying to search for survivors and removing bodies. Raed, a friend, survived a strike on his family home, but now he looks for his loved ones. He points to the spot where he thinks his family must have been sitting when the strike hit. Usually they sit in one of these 2 rooms, he explains, pointing to a pile of concrete that he has deduced was one of those 2 rooms. We start removing stones and chunks of concrete with our bare hands. Under the concrete, we find books, lots of them. Raed says, yes, I'm right, this is the living room. These are my father's. For a second, I can't help reading the titles of the books. And suddenly we touch hair. We have to be careful now, as there seems to be a woman's head. After 19 minutes of clawing at the ruins and removing gravel and sand from the bottom around the head, we are eventually able to carry out the severed head and chest. We put it on a blanket and continue searching for the rest of the body. After an hour, we've only managed to collect severed pieces of her body, part of an arm, a few fingers, a few spinal discs, and the legs. It's a surreal world. Someone brings me a spade, and I dig looking for more bodies. Raed is sure the rest of them are down there. A young man shouts that he's heard someone panicking a few meters east of him. Our work is now to pinpoint that exact source of sound coming from below. After an hour, the young man was saved and carried to the hospital. Back at Faraj's place, we sit in silence, not believing what we've just witnessed. We all feel that by the end of the war, our entire group will be killed. None of us will be left. For 3 hours, we chat, sharing the names of those we know who've died and reminisce about them, refreshing old memories. As we talk, we suddenly remember old friends we hadn't heard from recently and wonder if they're still with us. Our friend Adam lost 2 of his cousins. His older son survived by a miracle. He tried to talk to him on his mobile, but the boy's incapable of speaking right now. He's too traumatized. Truth be told, we're all traumatized. In the morning, I get to the press house very early. I tell Bilal, I miss myself. I miss Atef. I miss being me. Tuesday, 21st of November, day 46. We cannot stay in the north any longer, we've decided. The shells over the last 2 nights have been so close to the apartment we're staying in that I didn't just see the light and hear the thunder of their explosions. I saw them pass right by my window. The Israelis are getting closer every minute. Most of the outer regions of the camp are under full occupation now. I didn't close my eyes that night. I want to be awake when I die, I told my brother Mohammed. I want to see it happening. Before going to sleep, my son Yasser said he felt more afraid than ever. For the last 45 days, he's shown great strength in the face of everything, but we all have our limits. Let's see, I told him. In the morning, we'll decide. This was 2 nights ago. So yesterday morning, I went to see my dad to ask if he'd consider moving with us. It was a hard no. But most people have left already, I said. He's staying put, he insisted. Come what may. Then as I was leaving, he shouted back to me, get that boy to safety. That helped convince me. As I lay on my mattress last night, I realized it was not fair that my 15-year-old son should pay for my decision to come to Gaza and stay so long in the north. He might have survived 45 days, but would he survive the next 45? I do not have the right to decide for him. In her last phone call from Ramallah, my wife Hannah said simply, I want my boy. You took him to Gaza, you bring him back. When this morning finally comes, The driver we've hired for the first leg of our journey arrives. My father-in-law, Mustafa, and his wife, Widad, who uses a wheelchair, they're traveling with us. I carry my mother-in-law into the car. As the car sets off, we all try to prepare ourselves mentally for the long journey ahead. We get to the Kuwait traffic junction and negotiate the hire of 2 donkey carts to carry us all to a gathering area along Salah al-Din Street, the main north-south route already called the New Nakba Road by some. The cart ride takes only 7 minutes. In normal times, a donkey cart ride might be something we would do for fun, on a family day out, perhaps at the beach. But this is a grim day. This is a grim day out. When we get to the gathering area, thousands of other displaced people just like us are lining up, waiting for the Israelis to let them pass. This is the first time I've seen an Israeli soldier in the flesh inside Gaza since 2005. Knowing that we might become separated in the chaos, I tell Yasser in no uncertain terms that he is in charge of his grandmother, not just that he is pushing her wheelchair and keeping her comfortable, but also that he is her primary caregiver should the soldiers want to arrest him. I stay as close to them as I can, carrying 2 shoulder bags. One of them is particularly heavy. Before leaving this morning, I bundled all of our official papers, including birth certificates, diplomas, and deeds of ownership into this bag, along with several photo albums. These are our memories. These we must keep. We move on and arrive at a checkpoint at 7:20 a.m. Tanks line our route on the left-hand side. I see Israeli soldiers lounging about on top of them, sipping Arabic coffee. The soldiers closer to us shout at anyone who even looks at them, take out your phone in front of them, and you won't be seen again. Children standing in front of me are shaking. They're too afraid to talk in case they say something that will annoy the soldiers and cause them to start firing. I glance up occasionally to see if I can work out which one is in charge, which one will decide if we live or die, if we're allowed through or taken prisoners. After half an hour of waiting, a soldier speaks to us through an amplifier. He repeats the orders about moving in a straight line and not looking left, not looking right. We must only face forward. The faces of babies should not be covered, the soldier adds. At around 8 a.m., the voice tells us to start moving. This is the hardest part of the journey. The road is covered in mud and the asphalt is damaged, cratered everywhere and scattered with rubble and garbage. Yasser is struggling with the wheelchair. On several occasions, I have to help him lift my mother-in-law and the wheelchair over a crater. We have to move carefully. 3 times the old woman falls out of the chair completely, and I have to pick her up and put her back in. After 20 minutes, we're funneled through a temporary structure, a strange kind of room erected in the middle of the road. After that, we have to stand in a line and raise our ID cards. Now, finally, we're allowed to turn our faces to the left. In fact, we're ordered to do so that the soldiers can look at us and compare us with our IDs. They're many yards away and seem to be checking our details through binoculars. Are they really too afraid to be any nearer? Random individuals are summoned to approach the line of soldiers to be detained. A soldier might call out, "The one with the white t-shirt and the yellow bag, come." Or, "The one with the mustache, come." They're then asked to throw their bags to one side, kneel on the mud, and wait to be interrogated. As we walk past, a soldier calls out, "The one with the dark pullover." Yasser's wearing a dark pullover. I whisper, "Don't move." If they meant you, they would have said the one pushing the wheelchair. Inshallah, I was right. For another 2 kilometers, we struggle on, eventually reaching a stretch of road where the Israelis no longer flank us. My back hurts, my shoulders and my arms are sore, but we're relieved to be walking on an ordinary road again. But this is the hardest part. Although we're no longer being told where to look, I give Yasser my own strict orders. Don't look, I tell him. Don't look. Scores of bodies are strewn along both sides of the road, melting, it seems, into the ground. The smell is horrendous. A hand reaches out towards us from the window of a burned-out car, as if asking for something. From me specifically. I see what looks like 2 headless bodies in a car. Limbs and precious body parts just thrown away and left to fester. Don't look, I say to Yasser again. You just keep walking, son. We carry on walking for another kilometre or so until we arrive at a point where donkey carts are gathered and available to take people the rest of the way to where taxis and other cars are waiting.
I'm Kamila Shamsie. I'm reading Longing Inspired by the Law of Gravity by Fadwa Tuqan. For those who don't know, she was one of Palestine's great poets. She died in 2003. This is one of her last poems, and she was already bedridden by the time it was written. It's been translated from Arabic by Chris Millis and Tanya Tamari Nasser. Time's out, and I'm home alone with the shadow I cast. Gone is the law of the universe, scattered by frivolous fate. Nothing to hold down my things, nothing to weigh them to the floor. My possessions have flown, they belong to others. My chair, my cupboard, my revolving stool. Alone with the shadows I cast, no father, no mother, no brothers, no sisters to swell the house filled with laughter. Nothing but loneliness and grief, and the rubble of months. The years bend my back, slow my steps, blind me to the horizon. I miss the smell of coffee, the scent in the air, its absence in ecstasy where I drown morning and night. Time's out and I'm home alone with the shadow I cast. I miss the company of books, their consolation through trouble and joy. I miss my mother's ancient clock, family photos framed on the wall. I miss my oud, for all its silent, severed strings. Time's out and I'm home alone. The curfew hurts. It hurts me. No, it kills me, the killing of children near my home. I'm afraid of tomorrow. I'm afraid of the unknowable resources of fate. Oh God, don't let me be a burden, shunned by young and old. I wait to arrive where the land is silent. I'm waiting for death. Long has been my journey, O God. Make the path short and the journey end.
Salam. I am Ahmed Ghalayini, a Palestinian from Gaza. Although I was born in Saudi Arabia and my father was born in Cairo, my grandparents lived in Jaffa, and I don't know who lives in our home there now. In September last year, I went home to Gaza to resettle there. In October, I left our apartment, which has now been destroyed, with the clothes I'm wearing now and a small bag that had my laptop, toothbrush, some medication, and some books. In a tale as old as 1948, I thought we'd be back in 2 weeks. You know the rest. The poem I'm reading is called Say Free Palestine by Sara M. Saleh. She's a Palestinian, Egyptian, Lebanese poet. It's safe to say that this poem noted my obsession with justice in Palestine and chose me. As Che Guevara said, if you tremble with rage at injustice around the world, then you are my comrade. So say free Palestine to free yourselves and don't just say it. For I love you, say free Palestine. For snooze the alarm and snooze it again, say free Palestine. For I need a drink, hold the ice, say free Palestine. Enter your 6-digit PIN here and say free Palestine. For are you seeing someone, say free Palestine. For anything pumpkin spice, say free Palestine. For I'm freezing my insert whatever body part here off, say free Palestine. Say free Palestine for the Great British Bake Off and Love Island and The Bachelor. Say Free Palestine for separation of church and state. Say Free Palestine for Twitter. I'm not calling that shit X. Say Free Palestine for the limit does not exist. Say Free Palestine. Don't say rush hour. Say Free Palestine. Don't say happy birthday. Say Free Palestine. Definitely don't say Australia. Say land back and Free Palestine. Say sorry, then say Free Palestine. Don't say humanitarian pause. Say Free Palestine. Maybe don't say there are two sides to this story. Don't say conflict. Don't say collateral damage. Don't say eviction. Don't say self-defense. Just say Free Palestine. Say you are a demographic threat. Then say Free Palestine. For bedtime lullabies, sing Ana Dammi Falastini. Then say Free Palestine. Say no justice, no peace from the river to the sea. Then say Free Palestine.
Marhaba everyone. I am Ahmed Nehad from Gaza. For a while now, I've been introducing myself as a friend and mentee of the late Dr. Refaat Alareer, who introduced me to another friend and student of his, the brilliant Palestinian poet, Lina Al-Sharif. Today, I'm going to read Lina's poem, A Palestinian Seeks Therapy. I want to say Israel made me lose everything to history I had no hand in. I was born brown to a family that picked oranges, not fights. I want to say I'm here in my body, but I'm still trying to pull it from under rubble, trying to bring it to life. I want to say Israel occupies the space between me and my breath. The milk I breastfeed to my babies, the water I give to jasmines, the dreams I build. I want to say I'm angry, grieving, and I don't know which is which. And I want to hear these words: your feelings are valid. I want to ask, how can I end this? I still fear the night skies tuning colors. I still see the shadows of their rifles. Every barbed wire is a border. Every firework is a bomb. I want to say I love myself. I love us circling in dance, rowing in prayer, fisting in a battle, baking bread. I want to say I'm capable and healing, and quote Darwish, سيطلع من عتمتي قمر. But I say, I have trouble sleeping. You end the session and give me the prescription.
عدى النهار والمغربية جاية تتخفى ورا ظهر الشجر، وعشان نتوه في السكة شالت من ليالينا القمر. عدى النهار والمغربية جاية تتخفى ورا ظهر الشجر، وعشان نتوه في السكة شالت من ليالينا وبلدنا عالترعة بتغزل شعرها جانا نهار ما قدرش يدفع مهرها وبلدنا عالترعة بتغسل شعرها جانا نهار ما قدرش يدفع مهرها يا هل ترى الليل الحزين أبو النجوم الدبلانين يا هل ترى الليل الحزين أبو النجوم الدبلانين أبو الغناوي المجروحين يقدر ينسيها الصباح أبو شمسي بترد الحنين أبداً أبداً بلدنا للنهار بتحب موال النهار أبداً بلدنا للنهار بتحب موال النهار لما يعدي في الدروب ويغني قدام كل دار.
Monday, 4th of December, day 59. The house where I grew up, where I was born, was destroyed yesterday. In losing it, I've lost a part of me. It was in that humble concrete structure, sitting at my grandmother Aisha's feet, that I heard my first stories. I grew up to become a writer so that I could share them with the world and revisit the life she once had in a grand villa in Jaffa. That was before the Nakba, before she came to live in the narrow little house that became my family home in the Jabalia, having walked over hot sand with thousands of others, her young children in tow. I wrote my first short story in that house, never published, of course, about an old man who loved to tell stories but always forgot their endings. At 13, I'd begun keeping a notebook in which I scribbled all my drafts. Most of my stories were set in the magical kingdom that was that little house. They captured the daily events of our lives, like the weekly gatherings of mothers from the surrounding alley, their far-reaching conversations, their gossip, their jokes. Though it was small, less than 1,000 square feet, and only a single story, the house was our haven. It held 2 main bedrooms and a third, smaller room, a kind of living room. As my brother and I grew older, my father added a second floor to create a games room for us. To reach it, we climbed the wooden staircase that wobbled with every step. In that games room, I read my first novels, listened to music, and smoked my first cigarette away from my parents' prying eyes. On the roof next door, I kept baby chickens as pets. After graduating from university, I planned to get married, so we placed concrete over the rest of the house and built a whole floor, which we divided into 2 small apartments, one for my future family and one for my brother, Naeem, who had just been released from an Israeli jail. It was in that apartment that Hannah and I started our family and where I heard the cries of my firstborn. In the new floor's common room, we would get together and spend long nights talking, playing cards and smoking nagils. That's where I saw Naeem for the last time. It was the night before I left for Italy to study a PhD in Florence. Just a few months later, he'd be taken from us, felled by an Israel Defense Forces bullet. When I was alone in that room, I could almost hear his voice again, laughing as he told me jokes or the dreams he'd had in jail. The house a writer grows up in is a well from which to draw material. In each of my novels, whenever I wanted to depict a typical house in the camp, I conjured ours. I'd move the furniture around a bit, change the name of the alley, but who was I kidding? It was always our house. All the houses in Jabalia are small. They're built randomly, haphazardly, and they're not made to last. These houses replaced the tents that Palestinians like my grandmother Aisha lived in after the displacements of 1948. Those who built them always thought they'd soon be returning to the beautiful, spacious homes they'd left behind in the towns and villages of historic Palestine. That return never happened. Despite our many rituals of hope, like safeguarding the key to the old family home, the present keeps betraying us, but the past is ours. Many of the houses around us were owned by members of my extended family. The Abu Saifs were once one of the largest families in Jaffa. Even now, we have relatives living there inside Israel with whom we stay in touch. After the Nakba, the Abu Saifs, like all Palestinian families, scattered across the region. Some moved to Gaza, some to Jordan and Lebanon, and others to Egypt. In this way, our house was part of a wider house, the Jaffa Abu Saif house, and in it, we received relatives from around the region, along with their stories. When I think that our house was less than 1,000 square feet, I begin to doubt the number. It must have been bigger. To me, it felt like a palace, an enormous castle, the greatest building ever constructed. Though I've lived in many cities around the world and visited many more, that tiny ramshackle abode was the only place I ever felt at home. Friends and colleagues always asked, why don't you live in Europe or America? You have the opportunity. My students chimed in, why did you return to Gaza? My answer was always the same. Because in Gaza, in an alleyway in the Safdawi neighborhood of Jabalia, there stands a little house that cannot be found anywhere else in the world. If on doomsday God were to ask me where I would like to be sent, I wouldn't hesitate in saying there. Now there is no there.
Hello, my name's Shamshad Khan. I'm reading the poem Mahmoud by Maya Abu Al-Hayat, translated by Fadi Judah. It's from the collection You Can Be the Last Leaf, Milkwood edition, 2022. Maya wrote this poem in memory of her boyfriend who was shot dead at a demo in the West Bank. Mahmoud could have been our son. I'd have objected to the name, and for family reasons, you'd have insisted on it. We could have bought him a crib with a blue quilt and hung spinning musical animals to coax him to sleep. Could have stayed up all night for his first tooth, experimenting with various formulas because my breasts couldn't produce enough milk for his voracious appetite. And with a new Nikon camera, we could have captured his first step, and his verbal skills would have wiped the floor, with your niece's skills, of course. We would have disagreed over his elementary school. Nothing wrong with public education, you'd have said, and I'd have demanded a private one. You'd have turned your face toward me as you counted our few remaining dollars, to my wailing about balancing the budget. We would have been happy. His first school bag in one hand, his other waving to the neighbour's girl before waving to us. His teacher would have complained, as teachers are wont to do, and we'd have called her names for her blindness to the genius of our only son. Yes, we would have bought him a battery-operated car, built him a paper plane that doesn't fly, painted his teeth white, flipped his collar for coolness, and he'd have loved me more than you. Because of issues beyond my grasp, your jealousy would have grown mysterious. And when his voice changed, he'd hate us both and love the neighbour's girl more. Rumination would have haunted us for hours at night, our whispers advising us to be patient, let go, observe from a distance. Then you'd have lost your wits over his first cigarette, the hidden pack in the laundry room, but his tremulous voice would prevent you from slapping him with an open palm. You'd have forgiven him. You're kind like that. He'd only smoked in secret. But the first rock he'd have thrown at soldiers at the checkpoint to raise his heroic stock in Manel's eyes would have declared war in our house, biting followed by flying slippers. Nightly debates wouldn't have helped us to core solutions. I'd have to carry him between my teeth, fly him from one neighbourhood to another to shield him. But he'd run away. That would be who he'd always been. A misguided kid who saps the heart and soul. That's who he was. Still, you were martyred 8 years before he was born. And he was martyred 8 years after you were gone.
My name is Masa. I'm Palestinian. My father's from Tulkarem. My mother's from Ramallah in Palestine. I hail from a land of oranges and olive trees and oppression. And although we are supposedly characterized by 75 years of subjugation, although our oppressors have attempted to bury us and suffocate us, one day soon we will witness our liberation, and one day soon we will rise. And with that, I will read كل شيء يعرف أنكم ستنهضون. Everything knows you will rise, by Ghassan, Zaqtan. Now you are alone, says the wall that comes at night. There will be no knocks at the door, no pats on the shoulder. The roads that led to your dreams lie shattered, splayed like corpses on the arid ground. The paths you once crossed without fear to meet siblings and neighbors when seasons were rough, when life was hard and dry, are clogged by stone, unfulfillment and dark intent. The bridges that shined in the memories of your fathers fell in wadis that dried long ago. Expect no one from there now, but everything knows you will rise. The time is gone when far-off dust signaled comings and goings, siblings on the road or a letter from your family. The dust you see now is the destruction of your houses and the homes of your family there. The smoke past the hill is not caravans or people returning. It is the torching of your uncle's fields and the orchards you once exulted in. No dreams can grow in these vessels you gathered and kept, but everything knows you will rise. You have no siblings left, only this desert you gained, where you were thrown. This desert fed by your endurance, it advanced in your silence. The wall each time brings the past, the wall in place of the road. The wall seeps through rooms and windows, enters bedrooms bearing the scream that it throws on the lodgings and beds, on the shrouds of boys and girls. You have no siblings left. Now you are alone, but everything knows you will rise.
If I must die, you must live to tell my story. To sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings. Make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who left in a blaze and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself. He sees the kite, my kite, you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope. Let it be a tale. This poem is If I Must Die by Refaat Alareer. It is a fantastic, poignant and brilliant poem that has brought people to tears at many of the meetings and rallies that I've been at. I'm Jeremy Corbyn. I'm a member of the British Parliament. I'm a humanitarian who feels for the people of Palestine. It's been my honour to visit Palestine on 9 separate occasions. I've been in Gaza, I've been in the West Bank, I've been in the refugee camps in all the neighbouring countries. I've been in schools in Gaza, and I've seen the hope and the joy of children in those schools. They're now destroyed and demolished. Sadly, many of those children will join the other thousands who have died. I have great admiration and respect for the indomitable spirit and hope of the Palestinian people, and that's why we're doing everything we can. We're marching, we're meeting, we're demonstrating, we're demanding peace, justice, recognition, hope for all the Palestinian people.
Saturday, December 30th, the day after. Yesterday morning, on the 84th day of the war, mine and Yasser's names were included on the list of those who can leave. It all happened very quickly. By noon, we were at the Rafah crossing. The officer at the border gate called me forward and asked what numbers we were on the list. Numbers 13 and 14, I said. He let us in, and with others, we travelled across the no man's land between the two borders in a very slow-moving coach. After just 2 hours in the Egyptian hall, it usually takes much longer, sometimes days, we passed through the Egyptian border. Out in the daylight on the Egyptian side, it was cloudy, but I couldn't help looking to the northeast, back towards the strip, toward my home, the place where I'd nearly lost my life so many times, and where, if anywhere, my soul still resides. Yasser was ecstatic to be leaving. Aren't you also? He asked. I didn't know how to respond. I was relieved, of course. I'd survived, not because of any heroic act on my part, but because of luck. Pure chance. With survival comes a duty to tell the story, but also with it comes an inability to ultimately comprehend why you survived and others didn't. In the taxi heading west, I found myself absent-mindedly flicking through the last 84 days of horror and terror. It had all been a dream, I thought for a moment. Every detail of every day was perfectly vivid. I considered all those I'd left behind and suddenly felt ashamed for abandoning them. My father, my brothers and sisters, my in-laws, my nephews, my nieces. Did I really have to leave? I asked myself. It was the same soul-searching I went through when I left the North. Did I betray those with whom I lived all this time? Should I have stayed until the war ends? I spent 46 days in the north, seeing my closest colleagues killed every day. After that, I lived in a tent for over 30 days, sleeping on a mattress on the cold sand, often with only one blanket. My wife, Hannah, feels I should have left Gaza in the first few days of the war when the borders were still open. I now feel I should have stayed till the end. That's the exile's dilemma. You suffer if you stay, you suffer if you leave. When I left this morning, I stood for a moment and I looked at the tent that had been my home for over 4 weeks. I knew strangely that I would miss it. I wasn't going to miss the cold or the constant hunger, of course, but I was going to miss the moments I spent with so many others in their displacement. When I left, I hugged everyone one by one and exchanged wishes and promises for our next meeting, promises that we had no way of knowing if we would ever keep. I kissed my great-aunt Noah. She cried and made me promise to come visit her when this is over, if she's still with us. The first thing we decided to do when we left the Egyptian border was take a taxi to visit Wissam. She was initially treated in Port Said, but then moved to a hospital just outside Ismailia on the Suez Canal. When we arrived, I was shocked to see my niece Wissam all alone in her room on the second floor of the hospital. "Where's Widad?" I asked the manager of the hospital, who had very kindly received me and taken me to her room. "Widad was supposed to be with Wissam, taking care of her." "Unfortunately, your niece suffered from a nervous breakdown," the manager explained. Soon after I arrive, Wissam starts to cry, saying she wants her sister back. "She's all I have left," she sobs. "She's my family." The atmosphere in the room is almost unbearable. I repeated all the reassurances I had tried to give in the early days after the attack on their house. Hannah encourages me by text, saying that Wissam listens to what I say. I try to take a jokey tone. "You're an artist, Wissam, and I'm a writer. We have work to do." She raises her left hand. "An artist with one hand," she says. I laugh. "This is a magical hand, a hand that is more important than all the hands of the people of planet Earth. When are they going to fix me up with prosthetic legs and a hand?" she asks. I don't know the answer to this. Wissam smiles and says, "You remember in Al-Shifa, you promised me that I will have legs better than the old ones." I didn't know what I was saying, I whisper. "I have a gift," I say, trying to change the subject. "Have you bought me legs?" she jokes. "I think you'll like it," I say confidently. When I was waiting at the border, I started to look through the bundle of papers, notebooks, and photos I'd carried from my father-in-law's house before leaving for the south. Among them, I found a small notebook in which Huda, her mother, who was killed in the same airstrike, had written a love letter to Hatem, her father, who was also killed, before their marriage. Inside the notebook, there were also some of Hatem's letters to her, 35-year-old letters of love on which a family was built. Wissam goes crazy when I tell her about them. She has to have them. No one in the family has ever heard of these letters. Huda had hidden them away in her parents' house. It occurs to me these few photos and love letters will be the only thing Wissam inherits from her late parents. I go with Yasser to Port Said. It's midnight by the time we get into our hotel, and the first time I've seen a bed in months. I did nothing, just threw myself on the bed and slept. I felt my back rejoicing at the comfort. I heard my bones congratulating each other. As I fall asleep, I see the dead walk. I see the living die. I see a boy searching for his mother in the corridors of Al-Shifa. I hear his words, "Mama, Mama," flying through the air along with all the debris. I see trees uprooted and their fruit squashed into dirt under tank tracks. I see the walls dissemble in midair in ultra slow motion, slowly spinning and moving closer and closer to the occupants of the house, lying perfectly still in their beds, trapped in their slumber as if for centuries, like Sleeping Beauty. I see a girl crying for her lost doll, shouting for it to come back, angry with it. I see a city being erased from the world's memory, building by building. I see death sneaking through parks and gardens. I see it all, and still, even after 84 days of it, I don't believe any of it's happening. It must be a nightmare, I think to myself, in the dream. It must all be a nightmare. Widad had a nervous breakdown a few days after leaving Gaza with Wissam on their arrival in Port Said. When she crossed the border, she suddenly saw the truth. She'd lost everything, her mother, her father, her brothers, and she must now spend the rest of her life taking care of her sister with no legs and one hand. All of these realizations crashed in on her. All of these realizations crashed in on her at the same moment, and she couldn't bear it. Now she's being treated in a psychiatric facility in Port Said. This morning I visit her in her room in the presence of 3 other nurses. She's lost a lot of weight. For 3 weeks she's been given medicine and been subjected to psychiatric analysis sessions. She tells me she can no longer bear any of it. It's better if she dies. What do I have to live for, she asks. What is there even for Wissam to live for? How are we going to live? The only good people in the world have died, she means her parents. Why should we live on after them? I can't do it. You must carry on, I say, because Allah kept you alive for a reason. It is His wisdom. None of us can understand it, but you must struggle to prove Him right. On my way out of the hospital, I couldn't hold back the tears thinking about this beautiful, happy, vivacious young girl living with so many other older sufferers of mental health problems. This is the madness of this war. I've survived it. Who knows why? Only time will tell if Widad survives it, or if all my brothers and sisters, my father and friends will survive it too. What terrible news will reach me next? Now, as I sit on the balcony of my hotel in Port Said, I see everything. I see all 84 of the days I lived through. I hear voices and the screams. I see the rubble. I look deeply into the eyes of those who were killed. I'm still there. I walk towards my tent. I sit down with my friends to talk about the day's news. I nag Ibrahim for the umpteenth time to reach out to anyone who might have heard from our father. I smell the smoke of the fire, breathe in the steam of the boiling tea. I still see everything.
عصفور طلي من الشباك قال لي يا نونو خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو قلت له انت من وين قال لي من حدود السما قلت له جاي من وين قال لي من بيت الجيران قلت له خايف من مين قال لي من القفص هربان قلت له ريشاتك وين قال لي فرفتها الزمان عصفور طلي من الشباك وقال لي يا نونو خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو نزلت ع خده دمعة وجناحاته متين واتهدى بالأرض وقال بدي أمشي وما في نزلت ع خده دمعة وجناحاته متين واتهدى بالأرض وقال بدي أمشي وما في ضميته ع قلبي وصار يتوجع على جروحاته ضميته ع قلبي وصار يتوجع على جروحاته قابل لما يكسر الحبس كسر صوته وجناحات. قلتله انت من وين؟ قال لي من حدود السما. قلتله جاي من وين؟ قال لي من بيت الجيران. قلتله خايف من مين؟ قال لي من القافص هربان. قلتله ريشاتك وين؟ قال لي فرفطها الزمان. عصفور طلي من الشباك وقال لي يا نونو خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو. خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو. قلتله لا تخاف تطلع شوف الشمس اللي رح تطلع. وتطلع عالغابة وشاف أمواج الحلرية بتلمع. قلتله لا تخاف تطلع شوف الشمس اللي رح تطلع. وتطلع عالغابة وشاف أمواج الحرية بتلمع. شاف جوانح عم بترفرف من فوق ابواب العلية. شاف جوانح عم بترفرف من فوق ابواب العلية. شاف الغابة عم بتعلي على جوانح الحرية. قلتله انت من وين؟ قال لي من حدود السما. قلتله جاي من وين؟ قال لي من بيت الجيران. قلتله خايف من مين؟ قال لي من القافص هربان. قلتله ريشاتك وين؟ قال لي فرفطها الزمان. عصفور طلي من الشباك وقال لي يا نونو خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو. خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو. عصفور طلي من الشباك قال لي يا نونو خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو. خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو. خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو. خبيني عندك خبيني دخلك يا نونو.